7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Okay, so this is a recap of the Umbrella Academy Season 2, Episode 3. So, Klaus. This is how the whole Klaus cult thing begins, okay? So, it's 1960. He's in the diner. The owner comes. I don't know if that's the owner or just the guy that runs the place. Was telling him how he stinks and how he needs to pay his damn tab. He ends up, basically throwing him out. And so this well-to-do woman saw him on the ground and lifted him up, and she saw something in him. I don't know, but for a while they were inseparable. So the next thing you know, you see him, he's all cleaned up and he's in this hall and people are kind of standing around watching and waiting for him to do something. And next thing you know, he starts levitating and they're like, oh my goodness, like he's the second coming, right? And so the next thing you know, you see it's actually Ben holding his ass up, right? And so you kind of see him throughout the years and how he was accumulating more and more followers. So obviously in 1960 he was in Dallas, Texas. In 1961 he was on some caravan in Mexico. In 62 he was in India. And 63, for part of 63, he was in San Francisco, where it seemed like he had reached like the peak of his followers, and he pretty much had enough. He was tired of being followed everywhere, and it was too much for him. So he kind of dips out, and him and Ben jumped in the car, and they went back to Dallas, Texas. Okay, so we flash to Lila and Diego. Lila finds Diego stabbed and basically bleeding to death. She gets him home, and she's now back home as far as Elliot's place, and she's patching him up. And so he's asking her, why did you follow me? And she was like, it's a good thing I did, otherwise you'd be dead. Because I'm thinking he got there because 5 eventually found him, but no, she was actually following him. And so 5 comes in. He said, oh, not dead yet, huh? So she was like, you sound disappointed. And then she saw his neck was bandaged. That's where Pogo scratched him. And so she kind of traded bars with him for a while. And and she basically asked him what happened, and he was like, oh, I just ran into a family friend. So Vanya, she's driving, she got in the car in the middle of the night and she's driving, and all of a sudden she's seeing in the wee hours of the night this ice cream truck stopped in the road, and this guy's kind of waving her, I guess was trying to signal that he was having some mechanical problems, but you kind of see her spidey senses were tingling, and she stopped, and the guy started walking towards her. These are the assassins, but of course she doesn't know that until they start shooting at her. And so she pulls off, she gets into a car accident and veers off the road and ends up running into this cornfield, where eventually they corner her and her powers manifest. Now she's not sure what happened, how she did it, but all she knows is that they ain't there no more. Okay. So Elliot, he has all this sonar radar and all this kind of stuff going on, and there was a spike somewhere, and so it was something that number 5 was saying he was waiting for, like atmospheric radar, and he starts tracking somebody. So that's how he knew something had gone down in a particular location, and so he ends up finding Vanya. Now of course he knows who Vanya is, but Vanya doesn't know who he is, and so he kind of briefly goes through, like, I'm your brother, and I need you to come with me, we're in danger, da-da-da-da. Now, of course, she's reluctant because she's like, okay, these people didn't try to kill me. I don't know, you saying we know each other, but I don't know. But she goes with him. So Luther is out jogging, and he actually sees a woman who resembles Allison, but it actually wasn't. And so he had a little mishap, but then he got up and he just, kept on moving forward, kept on jogging. Vanya and number 5. Okay, no, wait a minute. I'm getting my notes mixed up. Okay, so you already found it. Okay, so Luther actually gets back to the club where Jack is sewing something up. I don't know what he's sewing, some sequence something. And so he starts talking to Luther about this upcoming fight that they're having. And Luther wanted him to use his connections to find Allison. And so he agreed to do that. He gave Allison's name. And he said he was going to put his guys on that, and they'll find out whatever they find out. Okay, so Allison arrives at a mansion. So I thought this was like the Hargreeves mansion, but it wasn't. So she arrives at this mansion, and she walks around back, And Klaus is like on his floaty in the pool, and they find she calls out his name, and they have their reunion, and it was cool, and they kind of get caught up, and she's talking to him about his cold, and he was like, it wasn't a cold, it was something else. She was like, it was a cold. He was like, okay, fine, it was a cold. And he was like, so what's been up with you? He was like, do you live here? And she was like, yeah, telling him where she lives in South Dallas, and how she's married, and her husband's name is Raymond Chestnut. And so he was like, was he in jail or something? Was he locked up? And she was like, well, how do you know that? He was like, yeah, we did time together. I know him. And, they're going to try to figure out. She was like, well, he was arrested again. And he was like, well, why couldn't you use your powers? And when she did the flashback, I was like, oh, that's right. She hadn't used her powers in a while, because when Vanya found out that she was using her powers to suppress hers, I remember she actually cut Vanya's throat. And so it took a while for it to heal. So she hadn't used her powers since then. So it wasn't so much that she stopped using her powers in the beginning. It was just that she was just out of practice. I'm assuming that's what happened when they initially came to the house to arrest Raymond. Okay, so we go back to the handler. So the handler is now in 1963 Dallas, Texas, and she walks into this pet store, and there's this huge aquarium, and of course it has like these chests and all this stuff in there. And this little boy is tapping on the glass, and she's like, you shouldn't do that. They hate that. And so she was kind of talking to him a little bit, and then of course, as kids do, they hard-headed. So he started tapping on the glass again. And she whispered something in that child's ear, and it scared him so bad he pissed himself and ran out the store. And so she saw this chest in one of the aquariums, and that had pearl in it. And for some reason, she zeroed in on that, which we're going to come back to that later. So we're now back at the police station. And no, actually, okay, so we're back with Allison. She's at the salon. And so they're having the discussion of whether or not they're going to move forward with the sit-in because Raymond is in jail. And a lot of the guys were like, they didn't feel comfortable having it because Raymond wasn't there. And so Allison was like, no, he would want us to move forward because he would understand that this movement is bigger than him and us. It's for a bigger cause. And so they took a vote, and they eventually voted to move forward with it. So back at the police station, Officer Friendly that was there, at the front desk when Allison initially went to see Raymond, and he wouldn't let her. Now all of a sudden things started to happen. The lights started flickering. All of a sudden his sandwich floated across the room and was thrown into the wall, and then the typewriter starts going, and it basically says let Raymond out or die. And so the next thing you know, Ben comes walking around the corner, and Klaus is just sitting there with his legs crossed, and Ben was so proud of himself. And so eventually Raymond comes out, and he was like, oh, you're the person that got me out? He was like, yeah, we're brother, we're family. And so of course, Klaus being a white guy, and this is, around civil rights. And so he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we all, I guess, in the eyes of the Lord or something, we brothers, but not in society, not here. Not in 1963 Texas, but okay, we cool. So they hugged. He was like, no, I'm serious. The family barbecues are about to get real interesting. He was like, yeah, I'm your brother-in-law. And so he kind of walked off. And of course, Raymond is standing there like, what in the hell is going on here? So, number 5 and Vanya, they're at a coffee shop. And he's kind of going into the backstory of what happened, how they got to where they are, the apocalypse, and how it followed them to, the time to 1963, and how they need to get to come together to work together to stave off this disaster that is surely coming in like 8 or 9 days. And he was like, you honestly don't remember anything? And she was like, no, she was like, I've been here for about a month. And, I was hit by a car, and I don't really remember anything after that. And so she remembers that she needed to call Sissy, but, so we flashed to Sissy, and Harlan, he was listening to the music, and something happened with the record player that caused it to mess up and skip, and so it sent him into, like, he started having a fit. He started throwing stuff and breaking stuff. Sissy tried to restrain him. He ends up biting her, and it was a whole situation for a minute. And so the phone's ringing, and she eventually goes, and she's able to get the phone. It's Vanya telling her that she's okay, and how Paulin is struggling right now and how she met her little brother. And 5 ended the call. So Vanya was like, why would you do that? I'm trying to, talk to my friend, give her an update. And he basically told her, look, we have so much time to get what we need to get together and figure out a plan on how we're going to fix the situation. You maintain contact with your friends is going to be the least of our worries in a couple of days. We need to focus on this thing here. And so they end up leaving the restaurant. So Lila and Diego is getting out of bed because he wants to go and find his father to find out what the hell is going on. Lila is telling him, no, you're in no condition to fight. She ends up knocking him back on the bed. And, they started talking. And she was like, when I saw you laying there, when she said that, he asked her again, like, why did you follow me? And she was like, I thought that you were going to be like everybody else and just take off. And when you were lying there, you reminded me of my parents. That's how I found my parents, and I was 4 years old. And so they, had their little situation, and of course they end up having sex. And so they end up having sex. So Jack and Luther, he's at the bar, and Jack comes in and says he found Allison. Her name is actually Allison, what is their name? Raymond? I forget their last name. Allison something. So he goes to the house and he has this box of chocolates and he walks up, and just as he was getting out of the car, this cab pulled up. And so Luther's standing there, and he's and Raymond walks up. Raymond gets out of the cab and he's like, can I help you? And he was like, yeah, I'm trying to find somebody that I think lives here. And he said, what's her name? He said, Allison Hargreeves or something, their last name. And he said, you mean Allison something or whatever? I can't remember her last name, her married name right now. And he was like, oh, okay. So he invites him in, and he's they start talking, and he revealed that she's married. They've been married for almost a year. So of course Luther is devastated because he was in love. He was in love with Allison. He had been in love with her for years, and now that she's married, and kind of that took the wind out of his sails. So he's sitting there actually eating the chocolates that he brought for her, and Raymond is making conversation like, where are you staying? And he shows them the wedding photo, and the phone rings, and he gets a call saying that he had to leave in a hurry. And he was like, do you have a message for Allison? He said, no, just tell her I really need to talk to her. He was like, oh, okay. So around this time, Allison, they decided to move forward with the sit-in. So Allison had walked in first and sat at the counter, and then other people, the other, members of the group walked in and they sat down as well, and was like, we want to be served. And so that was basically the call that he received, that they had moved forward, and that they were there, and it was all, a whole situation going on. The crowds had gathered, and of course the people were all around them telling them they needed to get out, they need to go away, And so of course at this point Raymond walks in, and he is like, okay, wait a minute, how well do I really know this woman? It's the 1960s, it's the civil rights, she's in the struggle, supposedly in the struggle with them, and then you have two white guys that show up claiming to be her brothers. Like, he's like really confused, and he's upset, and it's visible. And she's like, well, she could see that something's bothering him. So Klaus he pulls up to this hardware store, and he walks in, and he sees this guy David, and he's like, you tell he has a thing for this guy David, but David has no idea who he is. And so Ben is like, are you serious? Is this why we came back to Texas, so that you could for this guy? And so he's kind of making small talk with the guy, and Ben is like, this would be considered stalking, right? And so he bought some paint that he really didn't need. He just wanted to go in and talk to the guy, and he went and got in the car. And so Ben is like, what you're doing is wrong. You need to let this go. And Klaus was like, I really want to stop him from enlisting because I don't want him to go off and enlist in war and he go off and get killed. That's really all I want to do. And Ben is like, well, I hope you're prepared, for what the outcome for what might happen. And Klaus was like, yes, I am. But it's obviously that Klaus has feelings for this guy. So around this time, the siren, they sees police cars like blazing past them, and then he's like, oh my God, Allison. So, the police arrive, and they're now surrounded by all those people telling them they need to get out. The guy behind the counter, he puts this hot ass cup of coffee on the counter, and he pushes it all the way over into Allison's lap. So of course it burns her. She jumps up. Raymond has to defend her. The police grab him. They assault him. They put him in handcuffs. They're dragging him out. She's calling, out for Raymond. Like, what are you guys doing? This whole thing going on around this time. Luther is now in the ring fighting this guy, so it's flashing back and forth between Luther and having this fight and the stuff going on at this diner. And they got Raymond outside. They're dragging him to the police car. She runs out. She's trying to catch up with them. And next thing you know, Raymond is on the ground. And this guy's taking this baton or whatever, and he's beating Raymond down to the ground. And then eventually she grabs him. She pushed people out of the way. And she grabs the cop, and basically convinces him to stop. And the guy walks away. Now, at this point, Raymond is scared to death because he's like, wait a minute, what the hell just happened? What did you do? There's no way in the world a white cop will listen to what a Negro woman has to say. What is going on? What are you? What is going on with you? And so at this point, he's scared of her. Because he's like, I don't know who you are. And she's trying to say, no, honey, it's okay. It's, everything's going to be fine. And he's like, no. He basically runs away from her at this point. And so you flash back, and Luther, he's not into this fight because he's devastated that Allison is married, and the life he thought he was going to have with her is probably not going to happen. And so he basically throws the fight. So he ends up allowing the guy to knock him out. Of course, there were some cheers, there were a lot of boos because people had a lot of money on him. And then you see Vanya and number 5. And that, they were there and they saw the fight and saw him get knocked out. And he was like, well, why didn't he fight back? And it's like, he just didn't have any fight in him. So now we know that number 5 and Luther and Vanya are going to, eventually reunite. Klaus and Allison has already done that. Luther knows where Allison is, but at this point, Vanya and number 5 doesn't, so we still have to wait for that. And so it's later that night. Of course, Diego and Leela have already had sex. He's knocked out. She slips out of bed, gets dressed, and then next she goes to this pet store, the very same pet store that the handler was at, and she went to this very same aquarium, and she saw this chest that was in this aquarium, and inside that chest was a room key. So she grabs a room key and she goes to the room, and she's like, I'm sorry, I'm late. Can I order room service? And then who steps out of the bathroom? The handler. Mason said, but I guess she told her she could order whatever she wants, and she was like, thanks, Mom. And she kissed her on the cheek. I knew that bitch was shady. I knowed it from when I first saw her in the hospital. Like, why is she so attached to him? And why is she all up his ass? Like, what is up with her? I knew it. But anywho, that's how this episode ended. I decided to separate. I was going to do 2 and 3 together, but I didn't want to make the video that long because it was going to take forever to upload. So I just decided to separate 3 out. But yeah, that's how that episode ended, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.